In the shadowed annals of antiquity, where the sun once blazed upon colossal dreams carved from stone and ambition, there stood 7 monuments that defied the gods themselves. Towering statues that mocked the heavens, gardens suspended in defiance of barren earth, a tomb so vast it swallowed horizons. These were not mere buildings, but audacious declarations of human will against the inexorable tide of time. Yet history, that cruel archivist, has conspired to bury them beneath layers of sand, ruin, and myth. Forget the gilded postcards of tourist lore, the sanitized sketches in forgotten textbooks. These wonders were not eternal testaments to glory, but fragile provocations destined for erasure by war, earthquake, and the quiet indifference of ages. They rose as symbols of unparalleled ingenuity, only to vanish into whispers, leaving us to chase ghosts across crumbling maps. What hubris drove their creators to challenge eternity, and why did the world seem so eager to forget them? This is the story of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, not as polished relics of a golden age, but as harbingers of inevitable decay, enigmas wrapped in the dust of empires long crumbled. We will journey through the labyrinth of their origins, peeling back the veils of legend to reveal the raw geopolitics, the tyrannical patrons, and the seismic forces that birthed and then betrayed them. From the wind-swept shores of Alexandria to the mist-shrouded peaks of Halicarnassus, we will dissect each wonder with the precision of an archaeologist's trowel. The Great Pyramid of Giza, that solitary survivor mocking its fallen siblings, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a mirage of paradise amid despotism, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, a thunderous idol felled by fire and zeal, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, razed by a madman's flame, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, a sarcophagus of sorrow turned to rubble, the Colossus of Rhodes, a bronze giant toppled by siege, and the lighthouse of Alexandria, that beacon of guidance swallowed by the sea. We will uncover the paradoxes that defined them, monuments built to immortalize kings, yet undone by the very fragility of mortal hands. Through forensic unraveling of ancient texts, from Herodotus's wary chronicles to Pliny's awestruck inventories, we will trace their ascendance amid the Hellenistic sprawl and Roman grasp, their cataclysms in the crucibles of conquest, and the philosophical undercurrents that elevated them beyond stone to emblems of human aspiration and its limits. Imagine, if you will, standing at the edge of a vast desert at dusk, the last rays bleeding into the horizon as the pyramid silhouette looms like a judgment from the stars, or hearing the distant roar of waves crashing against a lighthouse's base, its flame a fleeting ward against the encroaching night. These wonders were not distant curiosities. They pulsed with the blood of their eras, reflections of societies teetering between enlightenment and oblivion. In the chapters ahead, we will descend into the cradle of their creation, the Bronze Age ferment where pharaohs and satraps vied for divine favor, and emerge through the tempests that claimed them, from Persian invasions to medieval earthquakes. We will confront the myths that endure. Did the Hanging Gardens ever truly hang, or were they a poet's illusion? Was the Colossus astride its harbor, or a fabrication of later romantics? And in their legacies we will grapple with what remains, not just fragments in museums, but the echo of our own transient ambitions. This is no mere catalogue of ruins. It is an excavation of the human soul, laid bare in marble and bronze. Now, lean in closer. Let the weight of millennia settle upon you as we begin this odyssey. Breathe in the dry air of forgotten quarries. Feel the tremor of hammers shaping defiance against decay. For in unraveling these 7 enigmas, we confront not just the past, but the fragile scaffold of our own world, built high yet ever poised to fall. Join me, then, in this quiet vigil over history's lost titans. What secrets do they whisper from the sands? And what warnings, etched in their silence, do they offer to us? To understand the seven wonders, one must first grasp the world that dreamed them into being, a tapestry of empires stitched from conquest, commerce, and cosmic awe, where the Mediterranean basin served as both cradle and grave. In the shadow of the 3rd century BCE, as Alexander the Great's successors carved up his fleeting realm into Hellenistic kingdoms, a cultural renaissance bloomed amid the rubble of older dominions. The Ptolemaic Egypt, with its fusion of Greek intellect and Nile mysticism, birthed Alexandria as a nexus of knowledge. The Seleucid sprawl in the east blended Persian opulence with Macedonian might, while Anatolia's city-states, like Ephesus and Halicarnassus, thrived on trade routes that ferried ivory, spices, and slaves across churning seas. This was no age of isolation, but of audacious interconnection. Philosophers debating in agoras, engineers sketching on papyrus under oil lamps, rulers commissioning spectacles to etch their names into eternity. Yet beneath this veneer of progress lurked fragility. The earth itself rebelled with quakes that fissured marble, while human ambition ignited in endless wars, from the Diadoches' fratricidal feuds to Rome's inexorable march eastward. The worldview of this era was one of divine hubris tempered by fatalism. Gods walked among men in colossal forms, demanding tribute in gold and genius. Kings styled themselves as semi-divine, their tombs and temples not mere architecture, but portals to the afterlife. Herodotus, the father of history, wandered these lands in the 5th century BCE, his eyes wide at the pyramid's scale, his quill capturing the labor of thousands, slaves or conscripts, who toiled under pharaonic whips to align stone with the stars. By the time Antipater of Sidon compiled his list of wonders around 150 BCE, these monuments had already transcended their locales, becoming a shared canon of marvels, a Greek lens imposed on Eastern splendor. But why these 7? Not for their endurance, but their extravagance, the way they inverted nature, suspended gardens where soil should not cling, lit paths through fog-shrouded straits. They embodied the Greek ideal of Thoma, the wonder that stirs the soul toward deeper inquiry. Yet they were born of Eastern autocracy, Babylonian ziggurats inspiring illusory paradises, Carian mausoleums defying death's finality. Geopolitics fueled their fire. The Persian Empire's fall in 330 BCE unleashed a torrent of wealth, plundered treasuries, redirected to glorify new masters. Ptolemy the Faun, Alexander's general turned pharaoh, poured fortunes into the lighthouse to safeguard his grain fleets from pirates and storms, a beacon both practical and propagandistic. In Olympia, the statue of Zeus wasn't just piety, it was pan-Hellenic unity, forged in ivory and gold to bind fractious city-states under Olympian gaze. Culture, too, was a weapon. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus drew pilgrims from afar, its coffers swelling the coffers of Artemis's cult, while the mausoleum honored Mausolus, a satrap whose Carian realm bridged Greek and Persian worlds in uneasy alliance. Worldview here was syncretic, gods with borrowed faces, rituals blending Eleusinian mysteries with Zoroastrian fire, but inevitability shadowed every cornerstone. The same trade winds that carried architects and artists also bore armies, and the seismic plates beneath Anatolia and Egypt slumbered uneasily, awaiting their wrath. This foundation was no static backdrop. It was a volatile alchemy, where genius and catastrophe intertwined. The wonders emerged from this cauldron as defiant spikes against the horizon, their creators blind to the irony that structures meant to outlast dynasties would themselves become casualties of time's relentless siege. And so, as we turn to the first of these titans, the Great Pyramid of Giza, we step into the dawn of their collective myth, where a single pharaoh's obsession with immortality set the stage for wonders that would both inspire and elude the ages. In the cradle of the Nile, where the river's serpentine coils carve life from an unforgiving desert, a pharaoh's gaze turned skyward, not in supplication, but in command. Khufu, fourth king of the fourth dynasty, ruled Egypt around 2580 BCE, his reign a brief flicker in the annals of eternity, yet one that birthed a monument so audacious it alone endures among its peers. The Great Pyramid of Giza was no temple to the gods, no palace for the living. It was a machine for the soul, engineered to propel a divine ruler into the stars, defying the decay that claims all flesh. But beneath its geometric perfection lies a paradox. A structure born of absolute power, yet whispering of profound vulnerability, its stones hewn by hands that history has rendered anonymous, its purpose rooted in a fear of oblivion that even granite could not fully quell. To grasp the pyramid's origins, we must descend into the Old Kingdom's worldview, a cosmos where the pharaoh was no mere mortal, but the living embodiment of Horus, falcon-headed lord of the skies, intermediary between the chaotic Nile flood and the ordered Maat, the divine harmony that bound earth to heaven. Egypt in the late 3rd millennium BCE was a realm of centralized might, its capital at Memphis a bustling heart where scribes tallied grain harvests, priests intoned spells against the underworld, and corvée laborers, farmers conscripted during the inundation's idle months, marched to the plateau of Giza under the relentless sun. This was an era of unparalleled stability, the Pyramid Age, when the state's bureaucracy mobilized resources on a scale unseen before or since, quarries at Aswan yielding rose granite for inner chambers, copper tools forged in Sinai mines, and a workforce numbering perhaps 20,000, not the slaves of later myth, but organized brigades fed by royal bakeries and housed in workers' villages, unearthed by modern spades. Khufu's ambition was no whim of tyranny, but a calculated response to existential dread. His predecessors, Djoser with his step pyramid at Saqqara, Sneferu with the bent and red pyramids at Dashur, had already escalated the funerary arts, transforming mastabas into stairways to the afterlife. Yet Khufu's vision inverted the very landscape, a true pyramid, smooth-sided and true to form, rising 146 meters from the plateau, its base aligned to the cardinal points with a precision that astronomers still puzzle over, deviating less than 3 arc minutes from true north. Why? The Egyptians saw the Benben, the primordial mound of creation, mirrored in these peaks. The pyramid's apex, once capped in electrum to catch the sun's rays, was a beacon for the pharaoh's Ka, his vital essence, to ascend amid the circumpolar stars, the imperishable ones that never set. In the pyramid texts, inscribed later but echoing older rites, spells invoke, "O king, you have not gone away dead, you have gone away alive." This was resurrection architecture, a defiant shout against Duat's shadows. But myth and fact entwine here like the Nile's reeds. Herodotus, visiting 2 millennia later, spun tales of 100 Auzausen slaves toiling 20 years, ramps greased with sand and water, a labor so grueling it birthed proverbs of exhaustion. Modern archaeology tempers this. Skeletal remains from Giza's tombs reveal well-nourished workers, surgeons mending fractures with splints. A society where pyramid building was ritual duty, not unremitting horror. Inscriptions on cornerstones daubed in red ochre by work gangs. The white crown of Khnum Khufu is powerful, speak of pride amid the dust. Yet contradictions abound. The pyramid's core, rough-hewn limestone blocks averaging 5 tons each, 2 million in total, hauled from local quarries via sledges and levers. Its grand gallery, a corbelled vault soaring 47 meters, engineered to withstand the earth's groan, and the king's chamber, lined with massive granite beams, each 50 tons, transported 800 kilometers downstream. How? Recent theories invoke internal ramps spiraling within the structure, or water-filled shafts to float stones, ingenious yet fragile solutions for the pyramid's very mass invited flaws. Subsidence cracks, alignments shifting under thermal expansion. Psychological forces shaped this colossus too. Khufu's era teetered on the brink of the Old Kingdom's zenith, with climate shifts already hinting at drier floods to come, omens of the famine that would fracture the realm centuries later. The pharaoh, deified in life, confronted mortality's irony. His body, mummified and entombed with canopic jars of viscera, would nourish the gods in the field of reeds, but only if the pyramid stood sentinel. Surrounding it, smaller pyramids for queens, boat pits with solar barges for the afterlife voyage, and the Sphinx, carved later perhaps under Khafra, guarded the necropolis like a riddle in stone. Trauma lingered in the cultural marrow, memories of chaotic intermediate periods when nomarchs warred and pyramids crumbled untended. Khufu's monument was prophylaxis against such anarchy, a cultural force binding the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, in unified awe. And yet, from inception, the pyramid embodied human fragility. Built in perhaps 20 years, its completion marked not triumph, but the seeds of its isolation. Later pharaohs, humbled by economic strain, abandoned such extravagance for rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Robbed in antiquity, its sarcophagus empty by the New Kingdom, the pyramid endured not through divine favor, but sheer mass, weathering sandstorms that buried rivals, earthquakes that toppled lesser works. It stands now as the sole survivor of the Seven, a sentinel over Giza's sprawl, its casing stones long stripped for Cairo's mosques, exposing the stepped core like flayed skin. In this first wonder, we see the blueprint of all that followed: audacity forged in isolation, genius shadowed by impermanence. The pyramid did not conquer time, it merely outlasted it, a mute witness to the wonders yet to rise and fall in the empires downstream. From the sun-scorched flanks of Giza, where the pyramid's shadow stretches like a finger accusing the dawn, our gaze shifts eastward, across the Sinai's barren throat and into the cradle of rivers that birthed the world's first cities. There, amid the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates converged in a fertile fury, arose the second wonder, a vision so ethereal it blurred the line between earthbound tyranny and celestial dream. The hanging gardens of Babylon, that verdant mirage suspended in defiance of arid despotism, were not gardens in the gentle sense of cultivated repose, but an engineered illusion of paradise, cascading terraces of lush foliage and murmuring cascades, conjured from the baked clay of a land that knew only dust and decree. Yet herein lies the profound enigma, a monument attributed to royal benevolence, yet rooted in the psychological scars of exile and conquest, its very existence a fragile counterpoint to the empire's iron grip, destined to dissolve like mist under the sun of skepticism. To unearth the garden's origins, we must immerse ourselves in the Neo-Babylonian world of the 6th century BCE, a realm reborn from the ashes of Assyrian conquest, where Nebuchadnezzar II ascended the throne in 605 BCE, his rule a tapestry of splendor woven with threads of subjugation. Babylon, that ancient metropolis straddling the Euphrates, was no pastoral idyll, but a fortified colossus of glazed brick walls, its Ishtar gate emblazoned with roaring lions in lapis and gold, processional streets thrumming with the chants of priests and the clank of chariots. This was an era of resurgence. The Chaldeans, Neo's predecessors, having toppled the Assyrians at Carchemish, only to face the looming shadow of Persian ambition under Cyrus the Great. Nebuchadnezzar's worldview was one of divine mandate, his inscriptions proclaiming him as the favorite of Marduk, the storm god whose ziggurat temple Etemenanke pierced the sky like a stairway for the divine. Yet beneath this celestial pomp lurked human frailty. The king's campaigns had ravaged Judah in 587 BCE, razing Jerusalem and dragging its elite into Babylonian captivity, a trauma that echoed through the Psalms as lamentations of uprooted vines and withered roots. It was amid this geopolitical crucible that the Hanging Gardens purportedly bloomed, though myth and chronicle entwine here more tightly than the very vines they cradled. Ancient sources, sparse and second-hand, paint a picture of Nebuchadnezzar's contrition or calculation toward his Median queen, Amytis, homesick for the verdant hills of her northwestern homeland. To soothe her melancholy, the king is said to have raised these terraced wonders on the eastern bank of the Euphrates, near the palace complex. A series of vaulted platforms, rising perhaps 25 meters in 4 receding stories, supported by columns of baked brick and bitumen, their surfaces waterproofed with layers of reed matting, lead, and soil thick enough to nurture trees whose branches swayed like canopies over the city. Water, the lifeblood of this parched domain, ascended through an ingenious screw or chain pump system, Archimedes' later invention perhaps echoing Babylonian ingenuity, drawn from the river by slaves turning cranks under the blistering sun, cascading down in rivulets that cooled the air and perfumed it with myrtle, pomegranate, and cypress. Strabo, the Greek geographer writing centuries later, described it as a theatre of greenery, visible from the palace roofs, where the queen might gaze upon simulated mountains, a psychological balm against the flat, sun-baked expanse that stretched to the horizon. But fact fractures under scrutiny, revealing contradictions as deep as the foundations themselves. No Babylonian record, cuneiform tablet or royal stele, mentions the gardens. They emerge first in Greek accounts, from Berossus in the 3rd century BCE, filtered through Hellenistic ore and perhaps Persian embellishment. Was this a true wonder, or a relocated mirage, shifted by later writers to Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon from earlier Assyrian palaces at Nineveh, where Sennacherib's aqueducts and irrigated parks hinted at such feats? Archaeological probes in Iraq, hampered by war and silt, have yielded no terraces, only the processional way and the gate's vivid blues, but no elevated Eden. Theories abound. Perhaps the hanging derived from the Persian word for paradise, Paridiaza, an enclosed garden suspended in cultural memory, or maybe subterranean pumps and counterweights sustained the illusion, a hydraulic symphony powered by the very river it tamed. The scale demanded mastery. Each terrace, if squared at 100 meters per side, would require tons of earth hauled from distant alluvial plains, stabilized against the Euphrates floods, its brines seeping to corrode the vaults below. Psychological forces propelled this phantom. Nebuchadnezzar's own inscriptions boast of planting gardens in his palaces, but they speak of royal seclusion, not public spectacle, a private defiance against the god's caprice, for Mesopotamia's myths warned of hubris, Enki's floods punishing overreaching kings. Cultural traumas shaped the garden's lore, too. The Babylonian worldview, steeped in the Enuma Elish's creation epic where Marduk slays Tiamat to form the world from chaos, saw gardens as microcosms of order, reclaiming Edenic fertility from the desert's maw. Yet the exile of the Jews, forced to till Babylonian soil while mourning Zion, infused the narrative with irony, paradise for a foreign queen, built on the backs of the uprooted. Nebuchadnezzar's madness, chronicled in Daniel as 7 years of beastly wandering, perhaps stemmed from such overreach, his gardens a futile grasp at permanence in a land where irrigation canals silted and salinized, foreshadowing the empire's fall. When Cyrus conquered in 539 BCE, diverting the Euphrates to breach the walls, the gardens, if they stood, faced their first unraveling, neglect, as Persian priorities shifted to Persepolis' terraces. Thus the Hanging Gardens embody the second wonder's paradox, a testament to engineering's triumph over aridity, yet undone by the very intangibility that made it wondrous. Unlike Giza's enduring mass, this was ephemera incarnate, vulnerable to flood, earthquake, and the erosion of testimony. It whispered of human longing, for home, for green against the grindstone of empire, only to fade into doubt, a spectral sibling to the pyramid's solidity. In its elusive origins, we glimpse the pattern of the wonders to come, creations born of psychological salve and autocratic will, their fragility not a flaw, but the essence of their allure, poised on the edge of myth's abyss. And as we venture toward Olympia, where thunderous ivory awaited, the gardens remind us that some marvels hang not by roots, but by the slender thread of remembrance. From the spectral terraces of Babylon, where imagined vines clung to the ghosts of forgotten queens, our odyssey draws westward across the Aegean's restless waves, toward the sacred groves of the Peloponnese, where olive branches whispered secrets to the wind, and the earth trembled with the footfalls of gods made manifest. There, in the sun-dappled sanctuary of Olympia, arose the third wonder, a colossus not of defiant stone or illusory green, but of chryselephantine splendor, ivory flesh, and gold raiment, animating the thunderer himself. The statue of Zeus, crafted by the hand of Phidias around 435 BCE, enthroned in his temple like a living deity, was no mere idol of worship, but a seismic embodiment of divine terror and human reverence, its gaze piercing the veil between mortal frailty and Olympian wrath. Yet this thunderous effigy, meant to cradle the soul of a pan-Hellenic faith, harbored its own shadowed paradox. A pinnacle of artistic genius forged in the fires of unity, only to be consumed by the very zeal it inspired, its fall a quiet requiem for an age of gods eclipsed by men. To excavate the statue's genesis, we must descend into the cultural and spiritual bedrock of classical Greece, the 5th century BCE, a golden interlude bracketed by Persian invasions and the Peloponnesian War's fratricidal grind. Olympia, nestled in the Elis region's fertile valley, was no ordinary precinct, but the beating heart of the ancient world's most sacred rite, the Olympic Games, quadrennial convocation where warring polis suspended strife under Zeus's aegis, athletes stripped bare in pursuit of arete, excellence that blurred the human with the heroic. This was an era of profound introspection amid existential peril. The Greco-Persian Wars of 492–449 BCE had scorched Attica's soil, Xerxes' hordes trampling sacred ground, yet birthing a cultural renaissance where democracy's ideals in Athens fused with pan-Hellenic piety. The Delian League's treasuries swelled with tribute, redirected not to war alone, but to monuments that affirmed Greek identity against barbaric shadows. Phidias, the preeminent sculptor from Athens, arrived in Olympia as the oracle's chosen, his workshop a hive of artisans. Goldsmiths hammering plates, ivory carvers polishing tusks from Indian elephants, painters layering lapis and vermilion, transforming a temple's dim naos into a theatre of the divine. The statue's inception was no isolated flourish, but a psychological bulwark against the traumas of invasion and division. Herodotus chronicled the Persian sack of gods' images in 480 BCE, sanctuaries gutted, idols hauled to Susa as trophies, igniting a collective wound that demanded restitution in scale. Zeus himself, in Homer's Iliad, hurled thunderbolts from Ida's heights, a paternal arbiter whose favor turned tides of battle. Now, post-Marathon and Salamis, his cult swelled as protector of Hellenic liberty. The temple, begun around 470 BCE after the Persian threat waned, was a Doric behemoth, 64 meters long, its pediments sculpted with the chariot race of local myth, Oenomaus versus Pelops, echoing the game's chariot spectacles. Within, on a throne of ebony, ivory, and gold, Phidias raised Zeus to 12 meters, seated yet towering, his right hand extended in benediction, clutching a Nike figure, left cradling a scepter topped with an eagle, his sandals ebony-studded, his himation draped in gold folds shimmering like storm clouds. Pausanias, wandering 2 centuries later, described the god's eyes of precious stones, flashing as if alive, the ivory skin warmed by olive oil anointings, the air heavy with incense and myrrh. This was syncretism incarnate, Zeus as amalgam of Mycenaean sky father and Homeric patriarch, his form idealized per Polyclitus's canon, proportions divine, muscles rendered with contrapposto grace, yet infused with Eastern opulence, ivory from Syrian trade, gold from Thracian mines. Myth and documented fact collide here like tectonic plates beneath Arcadia's hills. Ancient sources, Pausanias, Strabo, Pliny, marvel at the construction's audacity. A wooden armature draped in hammered gold sheets, removable for ritual gilding. Ivory plates soaked in the Alpheus River to curve them over the frame, assembled like a colossal puzzle in the temple's shadowed interior. No Greek text records the full cost, but estimates whisper of a fortune rivaling Athens' Parthenon, perhaps 1 Euros talents of gold, sourced from Croesus's Lydian legacy and Delphic offerings. Phidias's genius lay in illusion. From the Naos's entrance, the seated Zeus appeared to rise as if to fill the cellar, a optical feat defying static sculpture, stirring awe that bordered on terror. Yet contradictions fracture the narrative. Was this Phidias's masterwork post-Parthenon, or a collaborative toil spanning decades? Inscriptions from Olympia's ruins, votive tripods, athlete dedications hint at funding from across Hellas, Elis's neutrality ensuring safe pilgrimage. Psychological undercurrents ran deep. The sculptor himself, accused of embezzlement in Athens for Pericles' projects, fled to Olympia, perhaps infusing his Zeus with a redemptive fervor, a god of justice absolving human ambition's stains. Cultural forces propelled this creation too in a worldview where the divine was immanent, not transcendent. Gods walked stadiums, judged discus throws, their statues not symbols but conduits for epiphanies. The Olympic truce, ekikeria, bound the statue's sanctity. To harm it was to invite Olympian ire, as earthquakes frequent in the Rift Valley were read as Zeus's tremors. Traumas lingered. The centuries' plague in Athens, oracle-mongering blaming divine displeasure, amplified the need for propitiation. Phidias drew from Phidias's own chryselephantine Athena, but scaled it to godhead, the statue a cultural anchor amid Sparta's rising shadow, its unveiling coinciding with the game's zenith, drawing envoys from Syracuse to Macedon. Yet from the outset, fragility shadowed the gold. Ivory prone to cracking in humid summers, gold tempting thieves, the temple's earthquakes, minor shifts documented in 373 BCE, threatening the throne's stability. Phidias died in exile, his Zeus orphaned, a monument to unity in an age fracturing toward Alexander's conquests. In this third wonder, the statue of Zeus etches the pattern anew, audacity in animating the intangible, genius vulnerable to the elements it sought to transcend. Born of post-war catharsis, it enthroned not just a god, but the fragile dream of Hellenic harmony, its chryselephantine gleam a fleeting ward against the gathering dark. As pilgrims filed past, heads bowed under the weight of reverence, they confronted not eternity, but the poignant irony of divinity clad in perishable finery, ivory bleaching under torchlight, gold oxidizing in the breath of worshippers. And so, with Olympia's thunder fading into memory, We turn eastward once more to the silted shores of Ionia, where a huntress goddess awaited her marble apotheosis, only to meet her end in flames kindled by mortal madness. From the thunderous gaze of Zeus, enthroned in Olympian twilight, our path veers southward along the jagged spine of Anatolia, where the Aegean laps at shores laced with salt and sorrow, and the air hums with the chants of priestesses invoking a goddess of wild hunt and merciless arrow. In the marshy delta of the Cayster River, amid the teeming polis of Ephesus, a crossroads of Ionian trade where Phoenician merchants bartered silks for amber, and philosophers like Heraclitus pondered flux in shadowed colonnades, arose the fourth wonder, the Temple of Artemis, a marble leviathan dedicated to the Eternal Virgin, her form multiplied in endless columns that pierced the fog like spears of moonlight. Erected around 550 BCE, only to be reborn grander after cataclysm, this was no sanctuary of serene devotion, but a colossal engine of cultic power, its precinct a labyrinth of altars stained with sacrificial blood, its architecture a defiant weave of Greek precision and Anatolian mysticism. Yet woven into its very frieze was the seed of doom, a monument to divine ferocity, built to endure the tempests of faith, only to perish in the arson of a single deranged soul, its ashes scattering like the goddess's own untamed winds, reminding us that even the immortals' homes bow to human frenzy. To unearth the temple's roots, we must wade into the cultural morass of archaic Ionia, the 6th century BCE, a frontier of Hellenic expansion where Greek colonists from Miletus and Athens grafted their pantheon onto the fertile substrate of Lydian and Cimmerian legacies, birthing a syncretic brew of rational inquiry and ecstatic rite. Ephesus, founded perhaps in the 10th century BCE by Aeolian settlers fleeing Dorian upheavals, straddled the edge of empire. To the east, the Lydian king Croesus amassed electrum fortunes from Pactolus river sands, his realm a buffer against Persian encroachment. Westward, the sea lanes pulsed with commerce, ferrying grain from the Black Sea and ivory from Syria to fuel the city's workshops. This was an era of precarious bloom, the archaic flowering shadowed by the Persian War's prelude, Lydia's fall to Cyrus in 546 BCE, followed by Ionian revolts crushed in blood at the Battle of Lade. The Ephesians' worldview fused Artemis with Cybele, the Phrygian mother goddess, and local Ephesian figures like the many-breasted fertility deity, her cult a whirlwind of orgiastic dances by eunuch priests, the Megabizoi, who flagellated themselves in trance under lunar rites, their cries echoing across the marshes where her sacred image, an ancient wooden Zoanon fallen from the sky, brooded in a thatched hut. The temple's origins traced to Croesus's patronage, a geopolitical gambit to bind Ionian loyalty through piety's chains. Around 560 BCE, after his father Alyattes' temple burned, struck by lightning or arson, omens read as Artemis's wrath, the Lydian king funneled tribute to the architect Chersiphron of Knossos and his son Metagenes, who raised the first iteration, a sprawling complex on the marshy plain, its foundations sunk into silt with layers of charcoal and skins to quell the quagmire's shift. This Croesus temple, 115 meters long by 55 wide, boasted 127 columns, perhaps 36 sculpted with figures of gods and maidens, but it was modest prelude to the wonder that followed. Devastated again in 356 BCE, on the very night Alexander the Great was born, a coincidence seized by later augurs as divine portent, the Ephesians invoked the oracle at Didyma, rebuild grander, in honor of the goddess who had spared the city from Macedonian fire. Thus arose the Second Temple, the true marvel, under the guidance of Scopas of Paros, a sculptor whose hand etched friezes of Amazons battling Greeks. echoes of mythic Themyscira, where Artemis was said to roam, its 127 Ionic columns soaring 20 meters, each a monolith from distant quarries, fluted and voluted, one famously carved with a bull by the Amazonian queen herself, or so legend whispered. Myth fractures against the chisel of fact, revealing a structure of audacious engineering laced with cultural contradictions. Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, tallied the column's origins. 127 donors from across the Greek world, each sponsoring one, their bases inscribed with dedications, Croesus's gold among them, turning the temple into a ledger of alliance. The roof, cedar from Lebanon, spanned without internal supports, its cellar housing not just the Zoanon, draped in jewels and anointed with myrrh, but altars for hecatombs, where oxen lowed before the blade, their blood pooling in channels to feed the earth, mother beneath. Sensory immersion defined it, the air thick with incense from Arabian resins, the marble warmed by braziers, the distant roar of the sea mingling with flutes and timbrels during the Artemisia festival, when pilgrims thronged the sacred way, offerings of ivory statuettes and gold amulets swelling the temple's coffers to rival Delphi's. Yet psychological scars shaped this edifice. Ionia's history of subjugation, the Cimmerian raids of the 7th century BCE sacking earlier shrines, Persian satraps imposing tribute, infused the cult with defiance, Artemis as huntress-protector, her arrows avenging the violated. Herodotus, born nearby in Halicarnassus, noted the temple's role in trade, a bank for merchants, its asylum rights shielding debtors and slaves, a fragile bulwark against anarchy in a world where tyrants like Polycrates of Samos vied for control. Traumas ran deeper, cultural forces, twisting the goddess's image. Ephesus's matrilineal undercurrents, Amazon myths rooted in Anatolian warrior women, clashed with Greek patriarchal norms. The temple, a space where women, as priestesses and devotees, wielded influence rare elsewhere, their processions a ritual reclaiming of wild autonomy. Yet this power invited peril, the temple's wealth tempted, its isolation on the marsh, chosen for sanctity yet vulnerable to floods, mirrored the polis's fragility. Earthquakes, frequent in the fault-riven land, had felled predecessors. The 356 BCE fire, kindled by Herostratus, a fame-hungry arsonist who torched the roof's flammable timbers to etch his name eternally, prompting the Ephesians to ban his mention, an irony lost to time. Exposed the monument's Achilles' heel, rebuilt with Alexander's offered aid, politely refused, lest he share the glory, the new temple gleamed brighter, its sculptures by Scopas and Praxiteles infusing marble with motion, Artemis emerging from reeds, her quiver eternal. But inevitability loomed, Persian reconquests, then Alexander's campaigns left scars. Roman oversight brought tourists, but also neglect. In this fourth wonder, the Temple of Artemis crystallizes the pattern of hubris veiled as homage. A forest of stone columns aspiring to the goddess's untamed realm, yet felled by the very human passions it sought to channel. Devotion twisted into destruction, faith's fire consuming its own altar. Pilgrims who knelt before the Zoanon, fingers tracing the worn wood, said to hum with divine presence, confronted not eternity, but the melancholy truth that even marble yields to madness's spark. The temple endured centuries, its precinct a beacon through Hellenistic twilight and Roman pomp, only to crumble under the Goths' raids in 262 CE, earthquakes in the 4th century, and Christian zealots toppling idols in Theodosius's edicts. Fragments, columns in the British Museum, a lone column marking the site amid modern Izmir's sprawl, whisper of that lost grandeur, the marsh reclaiming what flames began. And as Ephesus's huntress fades into silted memory, we journey south along Caria's rugged coast to Halicarnassus, where a tyrant's grief erected a tomb not for gods, but for mortal sorrow. Its pyramidion a poignant spike against the indifferent sky. From the marshy vales of Ephesus, where Artemis's columns dissolved into the earth's unyielding grasp, our shadowed pilgrimage traces the crags of Caria's coastline southward through salt-lashed bays and olive-terraced hills, to the fortified harbour of Halicarnassus, a polis etched into the rugged promontory like a scar upon the Aegean's brow. Here, in the 4th century BCE, amid the twilight of Persian dominion and the dawn of Macedonian storm, rose the fifth wonder, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, not a temple to ethereal gods or verdant illusions, but a towering sepulchre for a mortal ruler, its marble flanks spiralling upward in a fusion of pyramid and peristyle, a defiant cenotaph that blurred the boundary between eternal commemoration and the raw ache of bereavement. Commissioned by Queen Artemisia II in 353 BCE to enshrine her late husband and brother, Mausolus, this was no mere tomb, but an architectural requiem, its sculptures weeping with the pathos of dynastic loss, its scale a geopolitical proclamation amid the fractious satrapies of Anatolia. Yet embedded in its very plinth was the inexorable irony, a monument engineered to conquer death's silence, only to succumb to the very seismic furies and barbarian hammers that prowled the empire's fraying edges, its ruins a fragmented elegy for ambitions buried beneath the indifferent tide. To dissect the mausoleum's ascent, we must plunge into the volatile cauldron of late classical Caria, a semi-autonomous Persian province where Hellenic ingenuity clashed with Oriental grandeur, and local dynasts like the Hecatomnids navigated the treacherous currents of imperial loyalty and regional revolt. Halicarnassus, founded by Dorian Greeks around 1100 BCE on a peninsula jutting into the Ceramic Gulf, was a nexus of maritime intrigue, its harbours teeming with triremes laden with Thracian timber and Egyptian linen, its acropolis crowned by the palace of Mausolus, who ascended as satrap in 377 BCE after his father Hecatomnus' death. This was an era of precarious equilibrium. The Achaemenid Empire, under Artaxerxes the Sioux, weakened by the revolt of the satraps, ambitious governors like Mausolus allying with Spartans against Persian overlords, while Athens' waning influence left Ionian city-states like Halicarnassus to forge their own paths, blending Carian warrior traditions with Greek symposia and Persian administrative scribes. The worldview here was one of hybrid fatalism. Zoroastrian echoes of immortal souls in the Avesta mingling with Homeric shades in Hades. Death not an end, but a threshold demanding opulent passage. Tombs as portals where the deceased's manes could influence the living, warding off ancestral curses or bolstering the realm's fortunes. Mausolus's rise was no serene ascent, but a forge of conquest and consolidation. His marriage to Artemisia, a union of siblings in the Persian custom, sealing dynastic purity, infusing their rule with an intimacy shadowed by isolation. Ambitious and enigmatic, Mausolus expanded Caria from Malassa's inland hills to the coastal League of Cities, subduing Rhodes and Kos in naval campaigns that echoed the Delian League's imperial grasp, his fleets patrolling the strait against Cilician pirates. Yet trauma scarred this expansion, the satrap's early years marked by familial strife, Hecatomnus' partition of realms among sons breeding rivalry, and the broader Persian canvas torn by the great king's endless wars, against Egyptians in the Nile Delta, against Greeks at Cnidus in 394 BCE, where Conon's Athenian victory humiliated the empire. Mausolus, ever the opportunist, shifted allegiances, minting coins with his effigy in the style of Alexander's forebears, fortifying Halicarnassus with walls that Herodotus, his fellow citizen, born 2 centuries prior, would have recognized as bulwarks against the inexorable. It was in this crucible, as Mausolus's health faltered, perhaps from the fevers of campaign or the poisons of court, that Artemisia conceived the mausoleum not as whim, but as psychological anchor. a structure to immortalize her consort's legacy, transforming personal grief into public monument, her inscriptions later proclaiming it a tomb befitting a god. The core events of its creation unfold like a forensic tapestry of genius and grief, documented in fragments from Pliny and Vitruvius, pieced together from the site's excavated bones. Upon Mausolus's death in 353 BCE, Artemisia, racked by sorrow that ancient sources likened to Niobe's endless tears, summoned the era's luminaries, the architects Satyros and Pythias of Priene, who envisioned a quadrangular base 38 meters square, rising in tiers to 45 meters, crowned by a stepped pyramidion, echoing Nubian tombs, yet infused with Ionian elegance. 4 colossal plinths flanked the corners, each bearing a quadriga driven by Mausolus's ancestors. Chariots of Amazons, gods and heroes, sculpted by Scopas of Paros, whose chisel captured the wild fury of Lycians in battle, their marble veins pulsing with motion. Bryaxis from Athens carved the eastern face, a procession of Mausolus and Artemisia in Persian garb, their figures solemn yet intimate, hands joined in eternal clasp. Timotheus of Ephesus rendered the northern frieze with Centauromachs, centaurs clashing with lapiths in a metaphor for civilized order prevailing over barbarism. And Leochares from Athens the West, Amazons falling before Greeks, all converging in a symphony of cultural fusion. Doric at the base for solidity, Ionic mid-tier for grace, Corinthian atop for aspiration. Construction was a drama of mobilization and mastery. The site's selection on Halicarnassus's urban fringe, near the theatre where Herodotus once declaimed, a deliberate fusion of civic and sepulchral space. Quarries at Mentlatmus yielded Proconesian marble, shipped by barge through the Gulf, while cranes of wood and hemp hoisted 30-ton blocks, their levers groaning under moonlight as slaves and freemen toiled in Artemisia's name. The pyramidion, 24 steps, ascending to a marble chariot drawn by Nike, gleamed with gilding, its apex piercing the horizon like a spear against oblivion. Sensory immersion defined the edifice, the air around it heavy with myrrh from funeral rites, the marble warmed by Caria's sun, casting shadows that danced like mourners across the friezes, where eyes of lapis inlay seemed to follow pilgrims ascending the steps. Psychological forces drove this labor. Artemisia's contests of rhetoric, inviting orators to debate Mausolus's praise, turned grief into spectacle, her own health waning as the structure rose. She died 2 years later, perhaps by her own hand in devotion, her ashes interred beside his in a vault of porphyry sarcophagus, guarded by sphinxes and lions. Yet contradictions riddled this rise from the outset, mirroring the hecatomnid's fragile throne. The mausoleum's scale, costing perhaps 3 suzerain talents, bankrupting the treasury, strained Caria's economy, its opulence a double-edged sword. Awe-inspiring to allies, provocative to rivals like the Rhodian exiles who plotted against it. Geopolitical tremors amplified the peril. Mausolus's death unleashed succession crises, his sister Ada reclaiming the satrapy only to be ousted by Idrius, while Persian reconquest loomed. Earthquakes, the Earth's subterranean wrath chronicled by Strabo, fissured the base early, demanding reinforcements of iron clamps that later rusted, accelerating decay. The mausoleum stood as wonder for centuries, its precinct a pilgrimage site drawing Roman tourists who marveled at the mausoleum name, birthing our word for tombs. But the core events of its erection were inexorably tied to downfall's prelude, Artemisia's fervor birthing permanence, yet inviting the very forces, tectonic shifts, Gothic raids in 334 CE under Gainas, that would pulverize it to dust. In this fifth wonder, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus etches the relentless pattern, a sepulchre rising from dynastic sorrow, its marble a canvas for human transience, genius shadowed by the geological groan beneath. Artemisia's vision did not defy death. It amplified its echo, the structure a poignant spike where love and power converged, only to fracture under time's unyielding hammer. Fragments in the British Museum, torso of Mausolus, stern and bearded, gazing into eternity, whisper of that lost totality, the site's mound now a quiet hill amid Bodrum's bustle. And as Carrier's shores recede in our wake, we sail eastward to Rhodes, where a bronze sentinel awaited its forge, its fall a testament to siege's merciless forge. From the shadowed harbours of Rhodes, where the sun dipped into the wine-dark sea like a coin tossed to forgotten depths, emerged the sixth wonder, a titan forged not from marble's cold permanence or ivory's fleeting gleam, but from the unyielding sweat of bronze, a colossus that straddled the Mandrake Strait like a guardian born of siege and salvation. The Colossus of Rhodes, raised around 280 BCE by the hand of Charis of Lindus, stood 33 meters tall, its hollow limbs sheathed in hammered plates over an iron skeleton, torch in one hand to guide mariners, shield in the other against the gales that howled from the Lycian coast. This was no abstract deity or royal sepulchre, but a visceral emblem of resilience, erected from the melted-down engines of Demetrius Poliorcetes' failed siege in 305 BCE. Its form, perhaps Helios, the island's patron sun god, or Apollo in radiant pose, striding the breakwater as if to embrace the horizon. Yet in this defiant posture lay the profound philosophical pivot of the wonders. From the static aspirations of pyramids and temples, these later monuments evolved toward dynamic intervention, human will not merely commemorating the divine, but actively shaping the world's chaos, beacons against peril, only to reveal the hubris in such presumption, their inner evolution, a slow unraveling from symbols of triumph to harbingers of collapse, illuminating the ancient soul's grapple with impermanence. To trace this evolution, we must peer into the Hellenistic worldview that birthed the Colossus, an age where Alexander's conquests had shattered the old certainties, scattering Greek thought across a mosaic of kingdoms from the Indus to Iberia, fostering a philosophy of cosmos, a ordered universe where Stoic endurance met Epicurean doubt, and engineers like those of Rhodes embodied the peripatetic ideal of practical wisdom, phronesis, turning abstract virtue into tangible form. Rhodes, that sponge-diving entrepot rising from volcanic cliffs, had weathered the Diadoches Wars with pragmatic neutrality, its democracy a bulwark of commerce where Stoic founders like Zeno debated fate's inexorability in the Stoa Poikiles shadow. The siege of 305 BCE marked a psychological nadir. Demetrius's Helepolis, a rolling tower 9 stories high, battered the walls for a year, its catapults hurling stones like thunderbolts, starving the Rhodians until plague and despair clawed at their resolve. Victory came not by arms alone, but by alliance with Ptolemy of Egypt, whose fleet broke the blockade. In the aftermath, the islanders vowed a monument from the siege engine's scrap, bronze rams, iron bolts, timber beams, transforming instruments of destruction into a philosophical talisman of anastrophe, reversal, where adversity forges renewal. The core of this evolution lay in the Colossus's conception, a deliberate shift from the wonder's earlier passivity. Unlike Giza's eternal vigil or Ephesus's ritual stasis, this giant was kinetic. Its feet, myths later claimed, planted astride the harbour mouth, ships sailing between its legs like supplicants under divine scrutiny, though archaeological consensus from the Mandrake's submerged remnants suggests it stood at the mole's end, a sentinel rather than astride. Chares, pupil of Lysippos, whose Apoxyomenos captured the body's mortal coil, poured 500 talents of bronze in Lindos's foundries. The metal fired in clay molds under the relentless Attic summer, its surface patinated to a verdigris glow that caught the dawn like emerging hope. Sensory immersion defined its presence, the creak of wind through hollow joints, the salt spray misting its base, merchants below offering libations of wine to Helios as gulls wheeled in homage. Yet this was no blind idolatry. Inscribed bases, per Pliny, bore dedications to civic virtue, Democracia and Eleutheria, elevating the statue from pagan relic to emblem of philosophical resilience, echoing Heraclitus's flux. The way up and the way down are one and the same. Psychological forces propelled it. The Rhodians' trauma of encirclement birthed a cult of endurance. Their stoic leanings, later formalized by Panaetius on the island, framing the Colossus as a metaphor for the soul's unbowed stance amid fortune's storms. As the Hellenistic era deepened, this inner evolution rippled across the wonder's collective canon, revealing a philosophical maturation from brute commemoration to enlightened utility. The seventh and final marvel, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, erected around 280 BCE under Ptolemy II Philadelphus, epitomized this turn, no longer mere spectacle for awe's sake, but a pragmatic enlightenment, its beam slicing the night to safeguard trade's arteries, evolving the wonders from divine provocation to human stewardship over nature's caprice. Rising 100 meters on Pharos Island's rocky spur, white marble base, octagonal mid-tower, lantern crowned by a bronze Poseidon, its fire, fueled by resinous wood and mirrors of polished bronze, projected 50 kilometers, a technological hymn to Euclid's geometry and hero of Alexandria's later hydraulics. Sostratus of Cnidus inscribed its dedication to the gods who save men at sea, yet beneath lay Ptolemaic realpolitik, Alexandria's granary fleets, vital against famine, demanded this ward against shoals and squalls, its construction, ramp-wound stones from Aswan, cranes powered by capstans, mirroring the pyramid's labor, but redirected toward life's preservation, not death's defiance. This philosophical arc, from Khufu's astral machine to Pharos' guiding flame, unfolds as revelation. The wonders began in the Old Kingdom's fatalistic theocracy, pharaohs stacking stones to bribe the afterlife, evolving through Neo-Babylonian illusion and Greek syncretism into Hellenistic rationalism, where monuments served not gods' egos, but humanity's fragile voyage. The Hanging Gardens, if real, soothed exile's ache with engineered Eden, a stoic balm against cosmic indifference. Zeus's statue, post-Persian catharsis, embodied Aret's pursuit amid war's entropy. Artemis's temple channeled wild divinity into ordered cult, yet exposed faith's volatility. Mausolus's tomb fused Persian immortality with Greek pathos, grieving power's transience. The Colossus alchemized defeat into symbol, teaching Anastrophe's wisdom, and the lighthouse, pinnacle of this evolution, illuminated the peripatetic mean, ambition tempered by utility, hubris checked by foresight. Ancient lists, from Antipater to Philo of Byzantium, crystallized this progression, not as random extravagance, but as a philosophical ladder. From Mystery's veil, myths of hanging vines, striding giants, to Revelation's stark light, where each wonder's fate whispered ephemerality's truth. Yet this inner turn harbored melancholy irony. Enlightenment bred vulnerability. The Colossus toppled in 226 BCE's earthquake, its bronze limbs shattered like overreached dreams, lying prone for 800 years until Arab conquerors in 654 CE sold the scraps, 8 camels per load, a quiet abdication of its guardianship. The lighthouse endured longer, its beam a constant through Roman and Byzantine twilight, but quakes in 956 and 1323 CE fissured its core, waves eroding the base until Mamluk sultans quarried it for citadel walls, its mirrors lost to the deep. In their evolutions, the wonders revealed the soul's odyssey, From violent assertion against death through contemplative fusion of East and West, to enlightened harmony with the world's flux, only to confront the ultimate lesson, that all philosophy bows to time's indifferent scythe. These monuments did not evolve toward eternity. They unveiled humanity's core paradox, ambition's spark illuminating its own eventual dark. And in that revelation, as the last flame gutters on Pharos, we glimpse not downfall, but a deeper wisdom. The true wonder lies in aspiring, knowing the fall awaits. From the flickering embers of Pharos' lost flame, where the sea's eternal murmur swallows the echoes of ancient beams, we emerge into the shadowed corridors of our own era, a time when the seven wonders persist not as towering sentinels against the horizon, but as spectral threads woven into the fabric of collective memory, fragments reassembled in ink, celluloid, and digital reverie, their ruins refracted through the lens of modern longing. These monuments, once audacious thrusts against oblivion, now haunt the margins of our cultural imagination, their legacies a tapestry of reverence laced with distortion, where the grandeur of their inception collides with the melancholy of their reinvention. In books that dust forgotten shelves, films that flicker in darkened theaters, and the ceaseless churn of popular lore, they endure as emblems of human aspiration's double edge, inspirations for our own fragile architectures, yet stark reminders of how history's brutal hand reshapes even the most defiant dreams into cautionary whispers. Consider the literary inheritance, a slow accretion of texts that began with the ancients themselves, Herodotus's wary sketches in his histories, where the pyramid's labor evoked not awe alone, but the grim calculus of pharaonic dominion. Pliny the Elder's encyclopedic awe in the natural history, tallying columns and talents with a Roman's empirical hunger, only to perish in Vesuvius's shadow, as if the wonders' fates pursued their chroniclers. By the Renaissance, these accounts ignited a revival. Pierre Bellon's 1555 voyage to Egypt, his woodcuts capturing the pyramid's scarred flanks amid Nile silt, birthing a genre of wonder lore that fused pilgrimage with philosophy. In the 19th century, Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire invoked the lighthouse as a metaphor for empire's guiding light extinguished, its fall mirroring Rome's own inexorable dusk. Modern scholarship deepens this vein. Donald Ritchie's The Seven Wonders of the Ancient World, 1987, dissects the Hanging Gardens' elusiveness through Babylonian hydrology, arguing their hanging as a poetic elevation of riverine oases, not literal terraces, a forensic reclamation from myth's grasp. Yet books also perpetuate fragility. UNESCO's illustrated tomes, like The Seven Wonders by John Romer, juxtapose Giza's enduring bulk against Ephesus's silted ghosts, their pages heavy with the irony that while the pyramid stands, its siblings live only in reproduced engravings, yellowing under library lamps, vulnerable to the very time they sought to defy. Film and visual media extend this legacy into the visceral realm, transforming stone and bronze into cinematic spectres that pulse with dramatic inevitability. Cecil B. DeMille's 1956 The Ten Commandments conjures the pyramid not as isolated tomb, but as backdrop to Moses' Exodus, its blocks hauled by enslaved masses under Ramesses' whip, a Hollywood infusion of biblical pathos that amplifies Khufu's original dread. The structure's mass a symbol of tyrannical overreach, crumbling under divine retributive floods. In the 2007 miniseries Seven Wonders of the Ancient World, produced by the Discovery Channel, CGI resurrects the Colossus astride Rhodes's harbour, ships gliding between bronze thighs in a spectacle of reconstructed hubris, its topple in earthquake waves a slow-motion requiem for Hellenistic optimism. These portrayals, atmospheric and immersive, draw viewers into sensory whirlwinds, the creak of temple columns under Ephesus's marsh winds, the glint of Zeus's ivory eyes in Olympian torchlight. Yet they harbour misconceptions, framing the mausoleum as a romantic lover's vault. Artemisia's grief romanticized into Gothic melodrama, eliding the geopolitical machinations of satrapal ambition. Pop culture amplifies this further. In video games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, players scale the lighthouse's spiraling ramps, its beam a navigational HUD against virtual tempests, turning ancient utility into interactive escapism. While Marvel's Thor evokes Zeus's statue in Asgardian thrones, blending chryselephantine splendor with superhero myth, the thunder gods fall a nod to the wonder's fiery end under Christian iconoclasm. Academic reinterpretations peel back these layers with analytical precision, revealing paradoxes that underscore human fragility. In the 20th century, archaeologists like Manfred Bietak challenged the Hanging Gardens' Babylonian locale, proposing Assyrian Nineveh as their true cradle. Based on Sennacherib's aqueduct inscriptions, a seismic shift that relocates the wonder from Nebuchadnezzar's shadow to earlier hydraulic genius, its legacy now a debate on cultural appropriation, Greek writers like Strabo projecting Eastern mirages onto Mesopotamian reality. For the Colossus, recent dives in Rhodes's Mandrake Harbour, sonar mapping submerged plinths, debunk the straddling myth. Propagated by medieval travelers like Ibn Battuta, confirming it as a harbour-end sentinel, its philosophical evolution from siege trophy to stoic emblem re-examined in Julia Kint's Rethinking Greek Religion, 2012, where it symbolises the Hellenistic pivot from anthropomorphic gods to civic resilience. Debates rage over the Temple of Artemis. Was Herostratus's arson a lone madman's act, or symptomatic of cultic tensions in Ionia's syncretic faiths? Feminist scholars like Sarah Pomeroy in Goddesses, Whores, Wives and Slaves, 1975, reinterpret its priestesses as bastions of female agency amid patriarchal encroachment, countering earlier views of ecstatic excess as barbaric relic. Misconceptions persist too. The lighthouse as a simple torch tower, ignoring Sostratus's reflective mirrors, now traced to Byzantine optics texts, fueling academic skirmishes that mirror the wonder's own contested terrains, each reinterpretation a trowel, unearthing not just stone, but the evolving soul of inquiry. In pop culture's broader embrace, these wonders infuse everyday ephemera with ancient melancholy. Disney's Fantasia 2000 animates the pyramid in a symphonic ascent of colors, its apex a burst of cosmic wonder, juxtaposed against the mausoleum's somber friezes in history podcasts like Hardcore History, where Dan Carlin dissects their geopolitics as harbingers of imperial decay. Board games like Seven Wonders simulate their construction, players vying for marble and bronze in abstracted antiquity, a playful irony that underscores the original patron's ruthless competitions. Yet this modern pantheon harbours a profound irony. While Giza draws millions to its shadow, selfie sticks framing its base against Cairo's haze, the others live in holograms and VR tours, the Hanging Gardens digitally terraced in apps, the statue of Zeus 3D printed for museums, reviving their sensory allure, the imagined cascade of Babylonian waters, the bronze tang of Rhodes's salt air, only to highlight their absence, digital ghosts in an age of simulated permanence. Academic voices from Mary Beard's SPQR to Bettany Hughes's Athens caution against romanticization, emphasizing the brutality beneath, the corvée dead buried in Giza's ramps, the eunuch priests' scars at Ephesus, the slaves melting siege engines for the Colossus, legacies that force us to confront not just lost grandeur, but the human cost etched into every cornerstone. Thus, the Seven Wonders' modern interpretation unfolds as a philosophical mirror, Their books and films, debates and distortions, reflecting our own era's aspirations, skyscrapers echoing the pyramid's profile, eco-domes aspiring to Babylon's green, yet shadowed by the same inevitability that claimed them. They teach not triumph, but transience. Misconceptions like the Colossus's stride persist as comforting fables, while reinterpretations strip away the myth to reveal fragility's core. In this reinvention, we chase their ghosts not to conquer time, but to commune with its quiet verdict, and that endures. As the echoes of these reinventions fade into the hush of our modern nights, where city lights mimic the lost beacon of Pharos and steel spires ape the pyramid's unyielding thrust, we stand at last before the silent tribunal of the Seven Wonders, not as conquerors of their secrets, but as humbled interlocutors, listening to the dust-laden confessions of stone and shadow. These titans, once forged in the crucibles of pharaonic decree and Hellenistic fire, now dissolve into the vast, indifferent archive of time, their forms reduced to spectral outlines in the mind's eye. The pyramid's lone vigil over Giza's sprawl, a scarred survivor mocking the voids where gardens once hung and colossi strode. The mausoleum's fragmented friezes, torsos gazing sightless from museum vitrines, their marble veins tracing the arteries of forgotten grief. What remains is not the clamor of their construction, the hammer's ring, the slaves' labored breaths, the priests' incantations rising like smoke, but a profound, resonant silence, broken only by the wind's low moan across archaeological trenches, carrying the faint, acrid scent of ancient incense mingled with the salt of encroaching seas. In this quietude, the wonders reveal their ultimate paradox. Monuments erected to defy the grave, yet unraveling precisely because they dared to dream of eternity. Their falls not accidents of fate, but inevitable reckonings with the human condition's core frailty. Reflect, then, on the philosophical undercurrent that binds them, a thread woven from the loom of aspiration and its attendant shadows. From Khufu's astral engine, that geometric riddle aligned to the imperishable stars, to Sostrates's flame-pierced night, each wonder embodied a worldview teetering on the precipice of hubris and humility. The Egyptians' Maat, harmony wrested from chaos, giving way to the Greeks' Thorma, wonder as spur to inquiry, only to culminate in the Hellenistic cosmos, where utility bowed to the inexorable flux of Heraclitus's river. Yet this progression was no linear ascent toward enlightenment. It was a spiral descent into revelation's melancholy depths, where the very ingenuity that suspended gardens or lit distant shores exposed the scaffold's brittleness. The hanging gardens, that elusive cascade of green against Babylonian aridity, whispered of exile's ache, a queen's homesickness transmuted into engineered solace, only to evaporate into scholarly doubt, reminding us that some triumphs exist more vividly in longing than in limestone permanence. The statue of Zeus, with its ivory thunder and golden storm, sought to incarnate divine paternity amid post-Persian scars, a pan-Hellenic anchor in the gathering gale of fratricide, yet fire, that elemental fury the god himself wielded, claimed it in the 5th century CE. Zealots toppling what awe had raised, an ironic inversion where the thunderer's own wrath circled back upon his effigy. Deeper still lies the irony of their cataclysms, forensic echoes of the world's unrelenting brutality. Earthquakes, those subterranean convulsions chronicled from Strabo's wary prose to modern seismographs, felled the Colossus in 226 BCE, its bronze frame buckling like a warrior spent in futile stand, lying prone amid Rhodes's rubble as if in supplication to the fault lines beneath. The Temple of Artemis, forest of Ionic spears against the marsh's murmur, succumbed first to Herostrates's pyre, a single mortal's madness etching oblivion's name, then to Gothic hammers in 262 CE, their blades carving through marble as invaders once carved through flesh. the goddess's wild autonomy reduced to column drums, scattered like broken arrows. And the lighthouse, that pragmatic sentinel slicing fog with mirrored fire, endured the longest. Its base gnawed by waves through Byzantine sieges and Arab conquests, until the 14th century's quakes hurled its lantern into the deep, where coral now encrusts what once guided empire's grain fleets, a submerged requiem for Enlightenment's fragile spark. These were no sanitized downfalls, but visceral unravelings, floods salinizing Babylonian soil, Crusaders quarrying the mausoleum for Bodrum's castle walls in the 15th century, their masons oblivious to the dynastic sorrow entombed within, each blow a punctuation in history's grim ledger, underscoring the grandeur's cost, the corvées' bent backs, the artisans' blistered hands, the rulers' tyrannical visions, all fodder for time's indifferent mill. In this introspection, the wonders confront us with a lesson etched not in their surviving stones, but in the voids they leave, the human soul's perennial dance with impermanence, where ambition's blaze illuminates its own eventual ash. They rose as provocations against the gods' caprice, pharaohs stacking eternity's weight, satraps suspending paradise from clay vaults, sculptors breathing life into thunder's form. Yet each collapse peeled back the veil, revealing not divine retribution, but the banal cruelties of geology and greed, war's hammer and neglect's slow rot. The pyramid alone persists, its casing stripped bare like a flayed colossus, enduring not through superior craft, but sheer stubborn mass, a mute sentinel over the Nile's eternal bend, whispering that survival is no victory, but a prolonged vigil amid the ghosts of siblings lost. Modern echoes resound here too, our own wonders, Eiffel Tower, Hoover Dam, the digital cathedrals of code, aspire with the same defiant spark, yet harbour the same seismic faults. Climate's rising tides, conflict's erosive bite, reminding us that every edifice, be it bronze or binary, bows to the same inexorable tide. And so, as the sun sinks behind Giza's horizon, casting the pyramid's shadow long across the sands like a final, accusing finger, we close this odyssey not with resolution, but with the quiet weight of paradox. These 7 wonders did not vanish to punish our overreach, but to illuminate its poetry, the beauty in building high, knowing the fall impends, the melancholy grace in chasing mirages across millennia, only to find truth in their absence. They teach that history's brutality is no aberration, but the forge of our fragile grandeur, where loss carves deeper than any chisel, and in that carving we glimpse our own reflection, dreamers stacking stones against the dark, ever aware that dawn will claim them all the same. Breathe in, then, the dry whisper of the desert wind. Let it carry you back through the ages, to the hammer's fading ring, the flame's dying glow. For in their silence the wonders endure, not as ruins, but as mirrors to the soul's unquenchable fire. And that changes everything.